Okay, it's our first class. Okay, yesterday we were talking about grammar translation method. Directly, I am teaching you some teaching techniques. Grammar translation method, or in shortcut, you can call it GT method. Grammar translation method is often criticized method. It is a traditional method. It is highly criticized one, but it is used at larger degree, or it is used everywhere. While teaching second language or while learning second language, students must commonly use grammar translation method. This grammar translation method, it has its own advantages. At the same time, it has its own demerits as well. Though it is highly used one in modern time, teachers and students both they feel discomfort using grammar translation method because it has many reasons behind it. One of the major thing is that grammar translation method is a traditional classical method. It is a traditional classical method. You have to say that it is a traditional method, or you can call it a classical method. Please keep on writing. It is a classical method. You can call it a traditional or classical method. And it originated from Latin teaching. It originated from Latin teaching. It originated from Latin teaching. Okay? It originated from Latin teaching. And grammar translation method focuses on grammatical rules. It focuses on grammatical rules, or there is use of both languages, use of both native and target language. There is use of both native and target languages while teaching any second language. While teaching any target language, teacher often depends on native language, and there is frequent and unusual switching from one language to another language. It means that grammar translation method often focuses on teaching rules. Rules and structures are taught. Here in this method, rules are prescribed. Rules are prescribed in this method. Rules are prescribed, described, explained before any practice and discussion. Before any practice and discussion, students have to learn. Rules are practiced, described, and explained before any practice and discussion. This grammar translation method, students have to memorize rules forcefully. Students have to memorize rules forcefully. Students have to memorize. Students have to memorize rules forcefully. If you follow this method, when a teacher comes to follow this method, students have to memorize rules forcefully. And this teaching method, grammar translation method, is totally against the practices of cooperative language learning, communicative language learning, and there is no any kind of cooperative learning. That's why you people have to feel that grammar translation method is against three concepts. There is no communication practice, there is no cooperative learning, and there is no any kind of assistance in learning. Teacher appears in the classroom. Teacher is dominating one. The activities of teacher are rule governed. In grammar translation method, teacher uses both languages, and when teacher frequently shifts from one language to another language, students do not develop communicative skills. They do not try to learn. And when teaching is unusually focused on teaching grammar rules and structures, students fear practicing communication. That's why when we practice rules, when we try to learn rules, we cannot develop English. When we were in our public schools, in the context of Nepal, when you were and even I was at school level, our teachers used to teach English in Nepali. As the result, we always develop a kind of unusual fear to learn English. And this method gives a priority to accuracy. The problem is that it originated from Latin teaching. In the 15th century, most of the students who were trying to learn English language or who were trying to learn English language from Latin one and Latin one from English, they had to depend on grammar translation method. That's why the name of the theory, name of the technique is grammar. That's why there is unusual emphasis on grammar, unusual emphasis on here you find rules are prescribed, described, explained before any practice and discussion. Students have to memorize rules forcefully. Students have to learn rules forcefully. Special focuses on grammar and structure. Special focuses on grammar, structure, and it gives special focuses on grammar, structures, and rules alone. And rules alone. There you find unusual emphasis on grammar, structure, and rules. And another problem is that the skills of language skills are taught separately. In grammar translation method, the 4 skills of language skills, listening, speaking, reading, and writing are taught separately. They are taught separately. And another thing is that this theory is against, this technique is against, it is against 3 practices. One is direct teaching. There is no direct teaching of English. It is not direct teaching. Grammar translation method is not direct teaching. It is one trouble. Second trouble is that it is against community language learning. It is against community language learning. It is against community language learning. At the same time, grammar translation method is against cooperative language learning. What is this technique? Grammar translation method is against direct teaching. There is no direct teaching of second language. Teacher only teaches about the whatness of second language. When you learn English language, you learn English language by using Nepali language. Your teacher often talks about English language. That's why learning language and learning about language, there are the 2 approaches. Either you are learning English or you are learning about English. The students who do major English or who take major English in education, they often learn about language. When you joined B.Ed and M.Ed, you learned about English language. But most of the students who did masters or bachelor in English from education faculty, they know about language, but many of them, they have trouble in English. That's why there are the 2 approaches of language learning: knowing about language and knowing language. You have to choose knowing about language or knowing language, learning language or learning about language. This grammar translation method is grammar translation method. This grammar translation method is all about knowing and learning about language. Knowing and learning about language. Knowing and learning about language, but not language itself. Not language itself. It is one of the major trouble. Grammar translation method is all about. It is all about knowing and learning about language. There is a huge difference between either you learn language or you learn about language. Learning language or learning about language. You find huge gap. What do you want? You want to learn language? What do you want? Do you want to learn language or learning about language? Learning about language. Learning about language means it is not better one. If you want to learn language, you have to communicate. If you want to learn language, you have to practice it. If you want to learn language, you have to be active in your classroom. In grammar translation method, students are not active in the classroom. Your teacher is one-sided. Teacher only speaks to you. Teacher is sometimes unusually commanding to you. Teacher imposes some grammatical rules on you. And whenever you begin to follow your teachers, the problem is that you never get chances and opportunities to express yourself. That's why you have to find some teaching traits here. Teaching traits mean some qualities. Teachers are often one-sided. They do not care for students. Teacher only teaches specific grammar chapters, and they do not produce rules with students. Teachers are one-sided. Now you have to see in grammar teachers. Teachers in GT. In grammar translation method, teachers are often one-sided. Teachers impose rules on students. Impose rules on students. Asked to use language correctly. Asked to use language correctly. Asked to use language correctly. Okay, they ask you to use language correctly. Do not make students, they do not make students creative. They do not make students creative and active. These are some of the qualities. Ask students, keep on writing, okay? Ask students to memorize rules. To memorize rules. Teach language in parts. Teach language in parts. Do not allow for classroom discussion. Classroom communication. No use of various teaching materials. No use of various instructional materials. These are the human nature of teachers. Okay, what are the teacher traits, or what are the traits of teachers in grammar translation method? Now you have to see. Teachers are in grammar translation method. Teachers are often one-sided. They are often one-sided. They impose rules on students. When I am teaching you through grammar translation method, if I teach you through grammar translation method, I come to impose rules on you. There is imposition of rules. they ask students to use language correctly. Teachers are too much curious, or teachers are too much conscious about whether you use language correctly or not. When we were in grade 4 or 5, our teachers used to make us memorize vocabulary. You had to memorize words, and we had to focus on reading. That means all of we, not only me and all of you, we came to learn English through grammar translation method. And one of the impact of grammar translation method is that when you become too much conscious about grammar, when you become too much conscious or over conscious about the rules and correctness of English speaking or writing, you do not develop fluency. That's why grammar translation method is often conscious about accuracy. It doesn't prescribe fluency. It doesn't care whether you become able to communicate or not. It doesn't care for whether you can write or not. It doesn't care for whether you develop some creativity in language use or not. Grammar translation method thinks that if you know grammatical rules, you are expert in English. It thinks that if you know all grammatical rules, you become good at writing and speaking. But this is a kind of wrong assumption that is often held and believed, argued, accepted, and claimed by grammar translation method. That's why what is teachers in GT, they ask to use language correctly. They often ask you to use language correctly, and they don't make students creative and active. Teachers who teach you through grammar translation method, they never attempt to make you creative and active. They never try to make you active. They appear in the classroom, they do write some structures on the board, and then they ask you, please make 10 sentences as I gave example to you. And you people, whether you can or not, you have to try to write some sentences out of the given structure. And when you become too much conscious about rules, structure, vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and all these things, you fear facing your teachers. And when students fear facing teachers, they cannot learn language. They cannot improve their English. They cannot improve their all these things. When I used to teach at master degree level as well, I often saw many students, they lack basic knowledge even in article. Many of our students, they lack basic knowledge in preposition. They don't know the basic rules of grammar, article, and the even tag questions and all these things. The only thing is that they learned language forcefully. They don't know the actual use of English language. That's why many students who are doing major English, they have a problem in grammar, because what they learned previously, that was all dependent on memory. That's why students are never active. Students never become creative in grammar translation method. In grammar translation method, teacher asks students to memorize rules, teach language in parts. Teachers teach language in parts and don't allow for classroom communication. In grammar translation method, teachers do not allow for classroom communication. And one more trouble of, or one more human trait of teacher is that there is no use of various teaching materials. Okay, teachers do not use varieties of teaching materials when there is grammar translation method. In grammar translation method, teacher plays the role of explainer. Teacher explains the rules. Teacher controls all the classroom activities. Students do not practice classroom activities. There is no chant, there is no role play, there is no classroom communication, there is no project work, there is no dialogue, there is no role play, there is no any kind of singing, chanting, and other activities. Students can learn English in total physical response. If teachers only teach in English, they can improve. That's why we often find many problems. Not only some students, but we have problem in preposition. Tulsaji, preposition, teaching preposition is often a difficult subject for we non-native students. That's why these are the traits of teachers. And one more thing about this grammar translation method is that, let me write you. In grammar translation method, okay, see some of the features of grammar translation method. What happens here in grammar translation method? Some features here. Let me point out some major features. There is maximum use of mother tongue, use of native language, native language. And when we become conscious about native language, error happens. There is use of native language or mother tongue. It is teacher centered. This method is teacher centered one. This method is teacher centered. And deductive approach of grammar teaching. Deductive approach of grammar teaching. Here, deductive means deductive approach of grammar teaching. First of all, you prescribe rules. Deductive approach of grammar teaching. There you find deductive approach of grammar teaching. It means teachers, they come to provide rules and previously developed and practice structure before they come to practice it in the classroom. That's why there is deductive approach of grammar teaching. Vocabulary is taught through translation. 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 There is elaborate presentation of grammar rules. 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 Next one is features. Elaborate use presentation of grammar rules. Separate teaching of language skills. Separate teaching of language skills. All students are treated equally. सबै विद्यार्थीहरु एउटै किसिमले ट्रिट गरिन्छ. All students are treated equally. Students are asked to memorize rules. Students are asked to memorize rules. Okay. Vocabulary and grammar are emphasized over speaking and writing. Vocabulary and grammar emphasized. Vocabulary and grammar are emphasized. Okay. Speaking and writing skills. Writing skills are neglected. These two sections of language skills, they are neglected. Priority is given to accuracy. Priority is given to accuracy. Accuracy, then fluency. No chance of classroom communication. No chance of classroom communication. there is no chance of classroom communication. In this method, there is no chance of classroom communication. And literary language is supposed she is superior to spoken language. And less attention is paid to pronunciation, listening, and speaking. There is no higher emphasis paid to speaking, listening, and pronunciation. That's why grammar translation method, it is not functioning well. This grammar translation method, it cannot improve the communication skills of students. Students who follow this grammar translation method, they cannot improve language learning because this grammar translation method, it is often one-sided, and this grammar translation method, it's separate teaching of language skills. Basically, we have to follow 4 language skills. You have to practice listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But teachers do not speak in English. When teachers do not speak in English, and when teachers do not provide some kind of specific model of speaking, students cannot improve pronunciation. To improve your pronunciation, to develop fluency, to learn communicative competence, and to build up competence level in you, you have to often listen to native English. But when teachers they speak in Nepali, when teachers they use native language, when teachers they frequently switch from one language to another, students they cannot improve English. The more we listen to particular language, the more we develop habit to it. We know that language learning is always a habit formation, but in this grammar translation method, we develop different habit. That is the habit of fearing teacher's presence. We fear speaking, and we fear correctness. We fear accuracy, and when we fear accuracy and correctness of grammatical structure, we fear expressing what do we feel or what is inside us. That's why grammar translation method never prepares students for language learning. It is totally a traditional one. It is outdated method. It is traditional one. It is a classical method. And teachers who come to teach English through grammar translation method, this method doesn't function well in case of young children. Young children, they can learn second language like that of the first language if there is use of direct method. You never speak English. Sorry, you never use your native language. Let's imagine we are in China. Mano, हामी China. Even if you don't know Chinese language, even if you don't know the rules of Chinese language, even if you don't know the grammar of Chinese language, and if you listen to Chinese people speaking in your presence for a long time, slowly and gradually, you develop English language. When people they speak in your presence, when you come to listen to the same sound frequently, your mind automatically begins to grasp what you are listening to. Because every time we human beings, we are born with, or we have language acquisition device in our mind. Our mind is always active, and we all human beings, we are equally capable to learn any language. And for that purpose, we are to be exposed to second language learning environment. But in grammar translation method, there is no such environment. There is no such an environment. And teachers, when teachers do not speak English, when teachers do not play on tapes, when teachers do not provide you English learning environment, when you do not get opportunities to listen to English text, and when you are not asked to listen to native speaker, you can't improve your pronunciation, you cannot develop your vocabulary power, you cannot develop your fluency. That's why in every respect or in every aspect of language learning or language practicing, grammar translation method is a failure. This method is dysfunctional one. This method doesn't build any confidence in you. This method does not prepare you to learn language, and this method is totally inappropriate for those people who want to learn language in natural environment. It is often good for people to know rules in second language. I don't say that using native language is totally wrong, but when we use native language for a maximum period of time, when we use native language for a long period of time, when we use native language for longer period of time, students, they don't get chances for second language learning. That's why while learning second language, or while practicing second language, or while being a part of second language learning, we are not to follow grammar translation method if we can. That's why there are many disadvantages of grammar translation method. Okay, is it clear? बुझ्नुभयो? ल आज फर्स्ट डे यति नै गरौँ, हामी धेरै बेर पढ्दैनौँ, दिनको 30 मिनेट 40 मिनेट 35 मिनेट यस्तै यस्तै पढ्छौँ है। ल किनकि रात पनि पर्यो, अब तपाईहरुलाई मैले सुरु मात्र गराउन थालेको, ह्याबिटमा राख्नलाई मात्र। इंग्लिशको चाहिँ तपाईहरु चिन्ता गर्नु पर्दैन, म छँदै छु है। ल थ्यांक यू। केही छ अरु केही सोध्नु पर्ने कुराहरु? क्लियर भयो? इज इट क्लियर? बुझ्नुभयो नि कि अलि फास्ट भयो? ल अब भोलिबाट हामीले धेरै बेर पढ्दैनौँ, आधी आधी घण्टा 35 मिनेट 40 मिनेट पढ्दै जान्छौँ र यो मैले पढाएको सबै टेलिग्राममा अर्को ग्रुपमा आउँछ। तपाईहरु इंग्लिशको लागि भोलिबाट हामीले नयाँ टेलिग्राम बनाउँछौँ है, फेरि छुट्टै हुन्छ। त्यो टेलिग्राम ग्रुपमा यो भिडियो पनि हुन्छ, अर्को अडियो पनि हुन्छ। अडियो एउटा एकदमै स्लो साउन्डको अडियो पनि छ इंग्लिशको, दुईटै सजिलो छ, चिन्ता नगर्ने। त्यहाँ मैले नोटहरु पनि पठाउँछु र तपाईहरुको होमवर्क पनि त्यही चेक गर्छु मैले। तपाईहरुलाई प्रत्येक दिन एउटा एउटा एक पेज एन्सर लेख्नु पर्छ। आज मैले केही पनि लाइन, भोलिबाट हैन त्यो काम गर्नुपर्नेछ। ल थ्यांक यू, टेक केयर, हैव अ गुड टाइम, थ्यांक यू, गुड नाइट।